we've got really poor education happening, and that is out of the control of a lot of people, because when we look at only about one, so if you look at the entire United States, we've got about 18 states that mandate medically accurate sex education. Now, sex education isn't just intercourse, everybody. It's the reproductive system. It's how hormones work. And if only 18 states have it medically accurate, what do the rest have? Well, I will tell you, it's inaccurate. It's agendas, it's policies that don't actually serve women.
They make your foundation, what costing them $1, they're selling it to you for 80, because if they, it would cost them, I don't know, $5 to make it properly and something that wouldn't disrupt your hormones. But because there are no regulations, or because they think they just want to make even more profit, it's not in their best interest to take care of you. Sure, does your body is able to detoxify? Yes, but then if you compound all of these things like pollutants and everything that you're putting on your face and your hair and into your food, then all of a sudden it's amazing. Like, I live between LA and Bali. I go to Bali, I immediately lose 5 pounds of inflammation.
Hi, my name is Aggie and this is Biohacking Bestie. The one-stop shop for a modern queen, where you can find biohacking courses, self-growth courses, and where you can find the most incredible community of women so you can hit all of your biohacking goals and beyond.
Dr. Brighten, thank you so much for being on the show. We had a bit of a chat right before we started. I listened to your audiobook actually. That must have been at least a year and a half ago. I'm trying to think. It was like back when I was, Is This Normal? So congratulations. Thank you for everything that you're doing for women and just being so relatable and approachable and educating women. And I remember I saw the story of you being on a plane and your son being surprised how many women come up to you and tell you how much your work means to them. He's like, what's going on? My mom is famous.
Oh man. Yeah, that was just like, I think a couple of months ago. And it is something that every time I'm on a plane or in the airport, and depending on the city I'm in, people, like, we were in Mexico City, and this woman she's running down the sidewalk shouting my name. And I'm like, how does this person? I was like, I must have left my credit card. We're at the restaurant. And then she was like, I can't believe I'm seeing you in real life. And I was like, oh, wow. And so that was after the plane ride. So I think even for me, I'm always taken back, because I feel like, you probably have a similar experience where you do this work and you're online, and when you're writing a book, these are very independent, isolated.
Yeah, you're in the room on your own
talking to people. And so then when people find you in the wild, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, there's other people on the other side. We talked via DMs, and you're real. This is amazing.
Yeah, it's really rewarding. I love that you mentioned that you're a conspiracy theorist. So let's start with that. And I want to ask you, why do you think, what's your theory of women that have followed your work or saw your book? They are women who probably have been struggling with their hormones for a really long time, and they find your account and they finally feel better. So I'm just curious, what's the official theory of why women struggle with hormones? What's your conspiracy theory on that?
Oh gosh, we were talking about conspiracy theory because Apple, if you're listening, I think you do conspire to make my Mac die when it's out of warranty. I think this. So, in terms of why do women struggle so much? Okay, so number one, we've got really poor education happening, and that is out of the control of a lot of people, because when we look at only about one, so if you look at the entire United States, we've got about 18 states that mandate medically accurate sex education. Now, sex education isn't just intercourse, everybody. It's the reproductive system. It's how hormones work. And if only 18 states have it medically accurate, what do the rest have? Well, I will tell you, it's inaccurate. It's agendas, it's policies that don't actually serve women. So there's that one piece. The other piece is that things I talk about in the book. The clitoral conspiracy. So there's a whole section called the clitoral conspiracy, where men did absolutely conspire, and medicine conspired to remove any knowledge of the clitoris from anatomy textbooks. The clitoris was not discovered in the 90s, as so many people will claim. And look, there's that wonderful female scientist that everyone's like, she discovered the clitoris. And listen, if that's how you go down in history, then fantastic. I will cheer you on. But no, you didn't. because we actually knew about the clitoris way back in the day. It was omitted from medical textbooks. It was purposely taken out. And when you look at how many times women's medicine has been dragged or talked about derogatory by male physicians, it is no wonder that we still find ourselves in the position that we do today, not understanding our hormones, our body, and how to take care of things. And just so anyone who's like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so like, what are you talking about? Just go back through and look at how hysteria wasn't removed from the DSM-5 until the 1980s. So that was in a lot of people's lifetime, that hysteria was still there to be diagnosed in women's medicine. And hysteria is a very demeaning thing. It's very derogatory to basically act like we go crazy once a month when it's related to hormones. Now, on the conspiracy side of things, here's what I will say. I think that there has been very good lobbying and very good influence on doctors and on nutrition industry as a whole to ignore endocrine disruptors. There are still doctors out there saying like, oh, well, the dose makes the poison. What you're getting exposed to is so little. And I'm like, you're really going to keep like, okay, like you've been parroting this for decades. And now we are faced with so much data. We are seeing that men today have 50% of the sperm that their grandfathers did. And it's not just the count, friends. It's the quality. It's the morphology. Like we've got mutant sperm that swim in circles and they can't do their job. And people are waking up to that. But when it comes to women, there's still a lot of gaslighting. There's a lot of money to be made to tell us that, look, I'm wearing makeup right now, right? That like we're not good enough without makeup, that we should do everything we can to avoid aging, that we need all of these products, that, so there's just a lot at large of things that impact women. Let me say this. You want to look at the industry with the highest rate of ovarian cancer? This has been known for decades. It is hairdressers. You want to look at the recipients of various beauty, applications. So like hair straightening, who's impacted majorly by that? We are seeing Black women with higher incidences of ovarian cancer, of breast cancer, of all these things. This has been well known, but it's not well talked about. And then we have doctors with their appeal to authority telling women, don't worry about that. It's not as big of a deal as you think it is. Endocrine disruptors, here's what they do. They will stop you from making hormones. They will stimulate cells and confuse them, hormonally speaking, and they will block you from being able to utilize your hormones. So tell me how that's not a problem.
I mean, so many things to unpack. I love how passionate you are. I feel like I'm getting rallied up as well, because it's just, it just gives so many things you touched upon. Like number one, hair and makeup, right? Like for thousands of years, women had the need to dress up. I travel a lot full time as a travel influencer before that. And I would go to like remote tribes in Brazil, and women would always like make their own earrings and, put effort in how we look. The problem is, so there's nothing wrong with that, right? The problem is that the companies trying to make the biggest profit, they make your foundation, what costing them $1, they're selling it to you for 80, because if they, it would cost them, I don't know, $5 to make it properly and something that wouldn't disrupt your hormones. But because there are no regulations, or because they think they just want to make even more profit, like it's not in their best interest to take care of you, right? And it's almost like this, like you said, sure, as your body is able to detoxify, yes. But then if you compound all of these things like pollutants and everything that you're putting on your face and your hair and into your food, then all of a sudden it's amazing. Like I live between LA and Bali. I go to Bali, I immediately lose 5 pounds of inflammation. It's like, and I eat healthy in the US, it's just like, things are in the air, literally. So I love it. Yeah.
Well, and I want to touch on, you're absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel beautiful, to wanting to use makeup, to being like, there's nothing wrong with any of that. And this is not a conspiracy in any way. And if people think it is, I invite you to go do research. The FDA is heavily influenced. When you have people sitting on boards of companies, of chemical companies and various companies, and then they jump and they sit on the FDA, and then they get this bonus and they go to another company, like this is capitalism, right? Yeah. And the problem is not you wanting to feel beautiful, look beautiful, chase a trend. That is not the problem. The problem is lack of regulation and lack of transparency, and how much burden gets put on the average consumer to try to figure it out. So as you said, like, you eat healthy in LA, that's a full-time job for some people, depending on where you live, to just procure food that they know is the least processed and going to be the best for their body. Yeah. And so I think it's really important for people to understand, as we talk about all of this, you're not the problem. We've got an industry-wide problem, but unfortunately, you're going to have to step up and take care of your body now. Please advocate for better things and dollar vote for sure. But exactly what you said, your body has the ability to detoxify. So we know if we can reduce the burden that's coming in, and we can support those emunctories, the way we move things out, we can still thrive in this environment. It is not doom and gloom. We are not there yet as a species, but it is very problematic, though, the predatory practices that happen. And, when we're talking about endocrine disruptors, I brought up Black women. If you go into the hair section, so I have curly hair, I have textured hair, I'm a Latina, it's women of color who are being disproportionately affected by that as well. And so there's so many layers to unpack in this conversation. And I think in that, as you brought up conspiracy, I'm like, and there's so many conspiracies that could come out of that. But at the end of the day, we just need to be taking individual actionable steps to take care of our health and not falling into the paralysis that this kind of fear can put you in.
100%. And, I'm not a doctor, but when I first got into like women's health, I realized that one of the biggest, like, my mission is to just basically help women understand what's normal and what's not. Because I have grown up thinking, if I want to kill my fiance before my period and eat a tub of ice cream, that's normal because it's my period, and my period's supposed to be painful. And I remember with my girlfriends, we just accept it as normal, right? And so when I realized, as I educated myself, it's not normal, then I regulate my hormones. I don't get hysteria before my period. I just feel like, okay, it's time. And I kind of feel like time to go inwards. I feel a little bit indoorsy, but I don't I don't feel like I want to kill people, but I used to. Yeah. And so I was like, my mission is to kind of help women understand what's normal and what's not, and point them to people like yourself so they can really like learn from experts. And then your book is called Is This Normal? Which... that's my conspiracy theory. Let's tell women that their hormonal issues are normal, so that way they just accept them and they do nothing about them, instead of being like, it's actually not normal what you're going through, and you can heal that and feel beautiful. And like you said, thriving is our birthright.
Absolutely. It's so well said, and I appreciate you saying that. I mean, that's what I really wanted to unpack in the book. There are a lot of myths where we get told that having debilitating periods, that's normal. I mean, that can be something where you miss out on life, right? Like 100%. You only got so many weekends, you only got so many years on this planet, so you're missing out on life. But it also can delay a diagnosis for something like endometriosis. We know that can take like 10 years before you get the diagnosis. And yet it's something that if someone didn't tell you that's just normal, you could have advocated for yourself sooner. And we get told all kinds of, like you were saying, like, I talk about the book, how if you are feeling like if your partner just breathes the wrong way, you're going to lose your mind before your period. That's not normal. Yet sitcoms, media, there's so many jokes and memes about it. And listen, like if you've ever been in it, sometimes you just have to laugh your way through it. And I totally get that. Yeah. And I'm not against like, let's have a good laugh about like, these common shared experiences. And yet It doesn't have to be that way. And there are a lot of things that you can do in order to take back your hormones, take back your health, and really thrive. And that's, I presented all of this is normal, that's not normal, and here's the spectrum of normal, and then here's exactly what to do about it in the book. Because the reality is that the majority of things that you're going to do to help optimize your hormones, to optimize your health, they're not going to happen in a doctor's office. They're not going to happen there. They're going to happen by what you put in your grocery cart, by whether you decide to hit the snooze button and sleep in more or get up and work out. By the way, there's no wrong decision there. It just depends on what's going on for you at that moment and what's true for you. So these choices that you make every day, I don't think we give people enough credit for the fact that I've always had this motto in my clinic. I don't heal my patients. I teach them how to heal themselves. I show them the way. But to think that whenever providers are like, oh, I healed this person, and I always laugh because I'm like, were you there cooking their meals? Were you there making sure they went to bed on time? Were you there taking those incredibly difficult steps every single day to make that change? You weren't. You were a guide. You were maybe a Sherpa helping carry some of that, but you were not, in fact, the person who made all of that possible.
Oh, so true. And I think it's just like, it's also disempowering. If you heal somebody as a doctor, like that just makes person feel like, it's your credit. But at the end of the day, it's just like the biggest, I think, gift that you also have is just to like be able to communicate information, because information is there. But the people that I look up to the most, they were the people that were able to take the complicated medical research and communicate it to me in a way that I finally got it, because it's like there are medical books out there. If no one's gatekeeping that knowledge, you can go to a library and probably start, study medicine on your own if you really wanted to, right? But it's just like overwhelming. And for most people, it's too complicated. But like listening to people like yourself and be like, okay, cool. That's really interesting. I finally get it. Thank you so much, right? Because it's super simple. I want to talk to you about fertility, birth control, PCOS, endometriosis, and sex.
Just everything. Just all the things. Let's go.
So I'm like, okay, cool. Again, love that you don't shy away from things like clitoris and sex. And in the book, you just very much like help women increase their libido, which happens a lot. It's down. And what would be the first step if you long-term relationship and people make you feel like it's pretty normal because you just had a kid or two and you're not feeling up for it? Where would you start?
Okay, so I missed the question because you cut out. It froze. So if you could just ask the question and then I can.
I was asking, so starting from sex and clitoris and becoming clitorate, what would I need to know about my own pleasure, about my own body, how to increase my libido so I feel absolutely incredible in bed, because it's like we almost write off pleasure as a nice thing to have, but not necessary,
Okay, as much as some people are not a fan of the World Health Organization, maybe this will make you a bit of a fan, at least a fan of this stance, in that they say that pleasure is absolutely an essential part of health. It cannot be overlooked. And I think that is something that medicine has negated for so long. And the myth has been perpetuated that women, they're not really into sex. It's so hard to make a woman orgasm. They don't have a libido. And these things are all myths. Like, listen, you might be asexual and that might be your normal, and that's fine. But that's 1% or less of the population. When it comes to the average ovary owner, so the person who was born with these hormones that are made to cycle, they're actually going to find a lot of the time that their experience ebbs and flows with where they're at in their cycle. And that is normal. So there's this meme that was going around, and I just laughed so hard when I saw it because the number of patients, I'm probably hundreds, have talked to me about this experience of my partner doesn't know, I was really into them. And then the next week, I just lost interest and I wasn't that as much in the mood, and they felt hurt. And what can I do to boost my libido during that time? And what herbs can I take? Cause it's always it must be broken. It has to be fixed. And the reality is I always ask, were you ovulating? Yes. And then you were heading towards your period? Yes. Okay. That's completely normal. So In the research, there is a phase of the cycle that's called the sexual phase. Now, I love this because if you're not someone who wants to have kids, you're past having kids, you're just like, that's not for you. Like, look, I'm a mom. I still respect that for you. And I don't like the idea that medicine's always like, oh, you have a womb, therefore everything is just to reproductive health. So, but if you are someone who's wanting to get pregnant, because you mentioned fertility, this is also your fertile window. So in the menstrual cycle, let me just back this up and start with your period. So period hormones hit zero. They, not totally zero, but they drop hard enough and quick enough that triggers the endometrial lining to be released and for you to bleed. So that's going to be your estrogen, progesterone. Some people are very in the mood on their period. Some theories are because testosterone has left the play, because there's a lot more circulation, blood flow, attention to the area. And because the risk of pregnancy is like it's zero on day one of your period, unless you happen to ovulate on day 5, but that would be an anomaly. So with all of that, so we're talking about physiological changes, we're talking about hormone changes, and we're talking about psychological changes all happening. Now, even while you're still bleeding, your ovaries are getting to business. They're getting an egg ready. As they're doing that, estrogen is rising. Now, whenever we talk about testosterone, I feel like it's changed. Like I used to, speak on stages and ask clinicians, when I say libido, what hormone do you say? And it was like 95% of the time people were like testosterone. That's changed a lot, I think, because I'm really noisy. But a big change has been, people recognizing that women are not just small men. So estrogen is actually a huge player in both our libido, so that's sexual desire, and our ability to get aroused. So that's the tissue's response, lubrication, engorgement of the clitoris, and our ability to achieve an orgasm. So we are seeing that estrogen ramps up. Now, before you ovulate, estrogen is going to spike. That's going to tell the brain the egg is ready. The brain releases luteinizing hormone. The egg is then released. Once the egg is released, progesterone rises. I love to make this joke that when progesterone is up, you would rather get into sweatpants than get into their pants, because that is legit the vibe. You're like, cuddle sesh? Yes. But with that, so people are probably like, get to the sexual window. When is this? Okay, as that estrogen ramps up, that's going to be about several days before you ovulate, the day of ovulation and the day after. So we're going to see about 5 to 6 days of your cycle. Not only are you more inclined to want to have sex, you're more inclined to fantasize. So this is where like any little stimuli that comes in, which is, I just want people to understand that like you might be on TikTok and you might be scrolling and like something pops up and your brain's like, oh, interpret sex. And your genitals and your body are like, whoo, sex. And you're like, wait a minute, does this say something about my sexual orientation? Or am I like into a kink now or anything? Not necessarily. That's just a part of your brain surveying the land. And it's really your logical self. It is like once that signal sets in, you get to decide, like, are you actually into that or not?
But so also it's like very beautiful way of nature to trying to get you pregnant, right? So like, we just gotta like boost her, like,
oh yeah.
Do you want to have sex?
Nature.
Yeah.
Nature is so tricky. So let's take that from that fertility standpoint, right? So you can use this information to get pregnant or to not get pregnant. So sperm. They're going to live about 5 days. And that is because your womb keeps them alive, like your little fallopian tube. So just so everybody knows, because this is one that's always kind of a surprise. Some people are not aware if they've not tried to get pregnant. So you're actually going to fertilize that egg. So sperm's going to fertilize the egg in the fallopian tube. Those sperm are basically waiting around loitering for pop. There goes the egg, little extenders, basically like sticky little fingers outside of the fallopian tube are going to help escort it in. And then that's where that sperm is going to meet up with the egg. So it's being tended to. Now, if this is where it's like people are, get confused about like how do you get pregnant? And, if you're trying to get pregnant, it's not any day. Like so many of us are told like, oh, you can get pregnant any time of the month. And it's like, well, no, it's actually very specific to your cycle. So you have a fertile window. 5 days before you ovulate, If you're trying to get pregnant, maybe those sperm are going to live, but really it's better to be like 3 days before you ovulate, the day of ovulation, and then that egg has 24 to 36 hours maybe to survive. It could even be less than that to actually meet with sperm. And so that is why this Mama Nature being so tricky is like, get in the mood, trap some sperm, capture it, have it available. That way, when we've got that like short little window, we could try to actually fertilize that egg. And so in the book, I go through like how to know if you're fertile, what are the signs of that, how to avoid pregnancy using that knowledge if you don't want to get pregnant, and how to get pregnant, because unfortunately, so many of us aren't told how to get pregnant until we've struggled for 6 to 12 months. And then doctors are like, oh, let me tell you, actually, this great kept secret we didn't want to share with you because you're too dumb to know your body and to be able to actually understand this. But there's this fertile window. Although I say that, and there are still doctors that, I had one the other day that was like, I just tell my patients do it every other day and they'll get pregnant. And I'm like, well, when people are trying to get pregnant, sex becomes a bit of a chore. It's a task. It's something they're checking off. It's less fun. And then to put the burden on them of like, you have to have sex every other day if you want a baby. I'm like, you're really a killjoy. Like that's inaccurate. And also like that'll wreck a lot of people's sex life.
Wow. It's so interesting to like even hear that there's still doctors out there that don't really understand the female body, right? Like it's just kind of shocking. What would you say to couples that are struggling with fertility? They felt like, you know, they just got married, they thought they're super fertile, they look healthy, and all of a sudden it's been 6 to 12 months and nothing's working. You know, they're definitely having sex around ovulation. So what are some of the biohacks for fertility that you would recommend to couples?
Okay, so number one, what's with the male donor there? Like, what is the male counterpart, like the sperm piece of all of this? And I say this because, like, we often talk about fertility from a heteronormative perspective, and yet I want people to understand that, I'm going to talk, and I am going to talk from that perspective because it's, quite frankly, simpler, but to also understand that, like, if you're getting a sperm donor and going that route, you need to make sure that, like, they have the healthiest sperm, because there's a lot of ways that people arrive to a baby these days. So I think we're always so quick to jump to like, what's going on in the woman's body? And I'm going to talk about that because we should talk about that. However, we understand so much more now that the inability to become pregnant, the risk of miscarriage, their negative outcomes on pregnancy and a baby is tied in to the male factor as well. And for too long, medicine ignored that. And really just everything became like, what's going on with the woman? So number one, I would say, is if you are smoking anything, I don't care, you can come at me, anything combustible, no. Because that's going to increase free radicals. Sometimes people are like, well, cannabis. I'm like, no. If it's combustible, you're increasing free radicals. So this oxidative stress.
What about the vape pens?
No. Oh my God, no. There's a reason why people are outlawing those. Just like there's so many reasons not to vape. It is just like, I just can't. Like seriously, I feel like we've gone back to the 1950s and people are like trying to find a reason why it's okay. And I'm like, immediately, no. There's really no good reason.
Thank you.
If you're doing this, like you're taking risks with your health, and it is your life. And if you want to take risks with your health, that's perfectly fine. If you are wanting to procreate and create the healthiest human to be a part of our society, you should really rethink that, because your bad choices are having a very negative impact, like generation wise. We're talking about the future of our species. So let's like take this seriously. So definitely no smoking. For men, they need to be increasing antioxidants, bringing in things like selenium, N-acetylcysteine, CoQ10, zinc, things that are naturally good for your testosterone. Those are going to help with sperm as well. So like lifting weights, managing your blood sugar, taking care of your circadian rhythm. What is not good is being on testosterone. So if you're on testosterone, you're going to have to come off, and it's going to take probably 6 months for the sperm to normalize. Now, the other thing I would say with the male factor, because people always ask, is, I would take a cell phone out of the pocket. I would not put a laptop on your lap. And there are people that are like, there's not enough data. And I'm like, these are things that you don't have to wait you don't have to wait for there to be enough data because it's a really simple solution. It's not putting you out in any way to do that. So that is some of the male component. Now, when it comes to women, if you're not getting pregnant and you believe that you're ovulating and your cycles are regular, because one of the first things I'd say is like, we need to investigate polycystic ovarian syndrome. Like, are you actually ovulating? Are your cycles regular? Because that's a leading cause of infertility. The other being endometriosis. And I will share that. I write Beyond the Pill. My whole like issue with the use of the birth control pill is how it is so often used to mask symptoms. So you've got painful periods, just take the pill. You've got irregular periods, just take the pill. And then nobody gets worked up and nobody understands what's going on. So I have a baby at 31. I have a baby at 40. I try for a baby at 41 to 42, and I have 4 miscarriages. And I'm like, what is going on? I can get pregnant. I can't stay pregnant. I finally get worked up, which was a lot of heartache. If anyone's been following my story, it was incidentally found on a pre-novo. I went there, got a full body MRI, and because I love data, and I know a lot of people are like against that. They would have never found my adenomyosis or endometriosis if I hadn't had that done, because I no longer had painful periods. But why I was put on the pills because I bled for more than 7 days and my periods were excruciating that I missed school. And I have to say that I went, God, what is it, like 29 years before getting the diagnosis for endo and adenomyosis, 4 miscarriages, a lot of heartache. And I am still like, and this is all very recent for me, so I'm still grappling with the fact that like, I'm who I was talking about in Beyond the Pill. I didn't write that book for me. I didn't write that book based on my experience. And yet I'm like, oh God, yeah. So I talk about that all the time. And yet here I am. So endometriosis, you don't have to have painful periods. You don't have to have pain with sex. You might sometimes just get like a little bloated. You might get an achy bladder. Like there might be very, very subtle things that wouldn't make your doctor red flag, be like, oh, we got to check for endometriosis. And yet we know that there are many women that when you can get biopsies, they can look at inflammation. Like there's like so many other things than just surgery. So forever laparoscopy it's still the gold standard, but it was like the only way to really get that diagnosis. Is no longer the case. But if you are struggling with fertility, it is just always worth mentioning that, because if you are regularly ovulating, everything seems normal. We got to go like, what's happening with the sperm? We want to test things like your thyroid, so full thyroid panel, just having TPO antibodies, which is what the diagnosis for Hashimoto's includes. Just having those, you may not be able to get pregnant or stay pregnant. You may actually be getting pregnant, but having what people call a chemical pregnancy. So it's an early loss, and it's so early and so close to your period that you don't notice and you never get those lines on a pregnancy test. So we have to check for that. We have to check for endometriosis. They need to start working you up to see, is anything going on? If you're over 35 and 6 months of trying, you don't get pregnant, you need to see a reproductive endocrinologist. And that doesn't mean you have to do IVF. You just need to see them and get a thorough workup. If you're under 35, the recommendation is you can go 12 months. As somebody who's been on their own fertility journey, I've always disagreed with that. And I full chest disagree with it now. I really think that if it's been 6 months, just meet with somebody, get that referral, see a reproductive endocrinologist, because they can go through all of your options, work you up, and understand what might be going on. And they're much more likely to also immediately bring in the male factor and look at what might be going on there.
So one final question before I ask you about endometriosis, but now that I go to, imagine my local endocrine doctor or reproductive doctor is not a biohacker, is not as educated as you are. And how do I take care of myself and my lifestyle? Because I feel like most people don't have access to a doctor that look at you holistically, like a proper functional doctor.
Yeah.
They look at you, well, maybe I give you a thyroid medication, or, I had a friend who had endometriosis and breast cancer, and the doctor's like, I don't think you should really change your diet. It doesn't really matter because you have chemo. like, so there are people out there.
and then here comes the like oncology dietitian who's like, what? Like an entire field exists to support people with exactly that. Oh, that's so maddening.
Yeah, so I'm like, because at the end of
okay.
the day, I want to empower women to be their own agent in this journey. So yes, please go see a doctor. Don't self-diagnose. You want to know what's going on. You want the data. Of course, it's so much easier instead of second guessing. But how do I like protect myself and take care of myself holistically while I'm on that journey?
Yeah. I just want to thank you for bringing this up, because I just was like, go to your doctor, do this. Like, in the United States, how many people have access to health insurance that actually covers these things? How many people can actually go to the doctor? How many people have already been to 5 doctors and they're completely exhausted? So I appreciate you saying that, because it is a real problem in getting a diagnosis in the US. And that's why I don't like people that completely gatekeep information and they're like, you have to get a diagnosis first. Because it's like, well, you know what? Even while you're getting the diagnosis, you can make these changes. So number one, both partners in the couple, get rid of the endocrine disruptors, everything that you possibly can in your house. It is a slow journey. And in some ways, a long journey. So I always say, take off your shoes before you come in the house, open up all your windows on a weekly basis minimum, make sure you're vacuuming regularly. The flame retardants that we cannot escape in our life collect in the dust in our house. And there have been animal studies showing that flame retardants cause oxidative stress in the ovaries. If they cause oxidative stress in the ovaries, they're causing oxidative stress in the testes. Like, they're bad news, not to mention they're bad for your thyroid. So you can take steps like that immediately. If you're listening to this, you can start doing these things today. Now, phasing out makeup, hair products, all of that stuff. What I always say is, look at what's in your shampoo. If it ain't good, look at how much you have in there. That's your countdown. That's how much time you have to research and find something new. And that's what you do, is you just start making the trades and the swaps. And then most people find it is so much more economical to actually like use vinegar to clean your house or use a tablet of a greener company than it is to actually be purchasing all those chemicals. So endocrine disruptors, absolutely. Dietary changes, yes. If you are somebody who can hang with organ meats, then my friend, that is like fertility secret sauce right there. Yeah. And I totally, like, I just want people to know, I'm definitely one of those texture people, and I do not like, there are things I do not like, but I suck it up and I eat it anyways, because it is so nutrient dense and so good for you. You want, one of the best sources of CoQ10 is beef heart. I tell my patients, go to the butcher, ask them for 25% beef heart ground up, mix it with 75% of ground beef. Over time, make it a 50-50. Now you're eating beef heart. And then people always say like, oh my God, that was like the juiciest, tastiest burger I've ever had. I'm like, see, and you didn't even know. But great source of nutrients. So
there is an option as a
nutrient-dense diet.
I take them in a supplement form. I put them in the fridge, the supplements, so I don't even smell them. And it's just, when I travel, it's kind of hard in LA to find a butcher that would have, like, you have to order one ahead. It's just they're making it so difficult, But growing up in Poland, we had liver once a week because it's healthy.
Yeah.
It's funny how like coming back to the same
and what
thing.
You're saying, like my first book called Healing Your Body Naturally After Childbirth, I recommend this always postpartum, like liver. Nobody made liver caps then, so I was like, you get them to cut up the liver into small pieces and you spread it on to like parchment paper and you put it in the freezer, and then you just like you have it frozen. And
that's such a good idea
to like make your own like liver, like tiny pieces to swallow, so you don't have to stomach it, because being postpartum is hard enough than having to choke down like organ meat if you don't like it. But now there's like liver caps, like Paleo Valley. I think they were the first on the scene with it. I think they have really good products. When I was postpartum with my second, I did not do like the whole liver. And I was traveling as well. So I was like, just give me the capsules. Great way to replenish your iron. So to your point about like the diet, absolutely. Diet plays a huge role. Fiber is something that we know the majority of people aren't getting. We know right now that like 10% or less of people in the United States are metabolically healthy. If you think that you can mess with your insulin and it will not affect the rest of your body, you are sorely mistaken. So in the book, I talk about the pyramid of hormones and really the foundation being adrenal health and insulin. if you have blood sugar dysregulation, I mean, that can mess with your libido, your ability to orgasm. So like, these are like how you even get into the act of making a baby. But there's certainly, I mean, that's a signal to your body that the environment's not safe, that you're not safe to be procreating. And so this is why there's been this boom of Ozempic babies. So firstly, I'm going to talk about this. Do not use Ozempic to get pregnant, because there have been adverse outcomes in animal studies, and the manufacturer says you should be off at 2 months before trying to conceive. So if they're saying that, if they're like, I will not have you for a customer for 2 months, like, of a very expensive drug, like, heed that warning. Okay, so that's
rare, right? It's like, from companies to actually warn you of their own products. So
yes. So, but why the Ozempic babies? Ozempic babies because, one, the hypothesis is that maybe you're taking the pill and it stops working because of the slower transit time in the intestine. We are seeing women who have struggled to lose weight because they're so inflamed and their insulin is dysregulated, and then they're given Ozempic and immediately inflammation drops. I've seen this in patients who do one injection and they're like, I can't explain how my clothes are fitting completely differently. And I'm like, then that's inflammation, friend. And, you sensitize the body to insulin. These things are going to support reproductive health. There are studies that show that if the womb, the uterus, is inflamed, there can't be implantation, or it can't be successful. And so this is why, part of why I think we're seeing like this big boom in Ozempic babies, is because when you move into being metabolically healthy, that's definitely going to improve things. Now, there's other things you can do. So I mentioned fiber, eating like 25 grams of fiber, diversity of fiber. I love that you're in Bali. I'm always like, when you go to a new country, like, find all the things that you're like, and first, if your first reaction is that's weird, eat it. Eat it. If it's a fiber-based something, eat it, because your microbiome is going to love that. They're going to be like, yeah, like, thanks for taking care of us. So there's that piece, getting your fiber up. There are, of course, we want to like strength train. We want to manage what we're eating. We want to have high quality protein. And I can talk about all that stuff. But people are also using inositol. So there's people are probably familiar with berberine as well. People are like, use berberine as an alternative to Ozempic. You cannot continue that through pregnancy. So if the goal is pregnancy, inositol is a better bet for you. And listen, there's no supplement that's going to be a medication. There's no supplement that's going to like be an exact match. But what does inositol do? So specifically myo-inositol supports ovarian function. So there are women with PCOS who start menstruating regularly when they're taking 2,000 to 4,000 milligrams of that a day, usually in conjunction with at least 50 to 100 milligrams of D-chiroinositol. Now, the other thing inositol does, helps you sensitize your body. So it helps with insulin sensitization. And it is also going to help you in terms of modulating your testosterone. We also understand that inositol plays a role in thyroid health. When you take it with selenium, it can help in terms of reducing thyroid antibodies, and it helps with sleep. So it's covering a whole lot of things. Beautiful. And the thing about myo-inositol is it's also safe in pregnancy. I always get the question where people are like, is inositol safe in pregnancy? I'm like, yes, it's in my prenatal plus. Like, I literally formulated my prenatal to have inositol. It is safe in pregnancy. Ozempic, that is not.
Okay, so you mentioned birth control and how, because I saw you actually comment on a post. There was a viral reel, and even myself, I encourage women to potentially get off birth control with a caveat. I'm like, it's not about getting off birth control. It's kind of like understanding the side effects, because my decision was never an informed one. And it's very different to take something knowing the side effects versus just being given a pill like, oh, look, this is this magical pill. You never get your period, or, X, Y, and Z. And you mentioned that birth control masks certain symptoms, but you also said that for some people you recommend birth control. So let's just unpack that. Yeah.
So when it comes to birth control, I think it's really easy, especially if you've had negative side effects. I mean, I'm someone who, like, if I have the drospirenone, that form of progestin, I've just found for myself personally, I can't function. I am depressed. I am angry. Like, it affects my mood so abruptly. So and then I talk about and be on the pill, like the yeast infections, the lack of libido, like all of the shit I put myself through for 10 years thinking my body was broken when it was the freaking pill the whole time. It's very easy when you have those experiences to come off of it and be like, that shit's the devil, because it feels that way in your body. And yet it's a tool, right? Like, there are people right now who are like, Ozempic is the worst thing ever. And I'm like, it's a tool. And we always have to evaluate, is this the right tool in this situation for this individual? My issue with birth control is it is the only thing you get. You go through this, like, crazy algorithm that seems to happen in a doctor's mind. You go in, you have period problems. They say to you, do you want to have a baby? If you answer no, straight to the pill. If you answer yes, they're like, oh, let's work you up. Let's figure out what's going on. Everybody should get that. Everybody should get that. Figure out what is going on and always have the option of the pill, because the pill is always there. Unless you're someone with like a factor V Leiden mutation or some other reason that like you cannot take the pill, it's completely contraindicated. But I just think that medicine is quite frankly lazy. Someone got big mad for me saying that, but I'm gonna say this. The pill makes it so a lot of doctors don't have to do their actual job. They don't actually have to work women up. They don't actually have to answer their questions. They don't actually have to spend any time with them. And a big part of that is not because your doctor's bad. It is because they are stuck in a system that says you've got 5 minutes with this person and then you have 50 more. And so, as we were talking about before, like, this is a big systemic issue where the doctor it's just like the pill is an easy person to blame. And yet, they're stuck in this paradigm as well with you. Mm-hmm. So there are absolutely a time and a place that people need to have access to the pill. So I spent 2 years working in a homeless youth clinic. My goodness, you don't have a door at night to close, you are at high risk of sexual assault. You need to have access to contraception. You need to have access to that. There are situations where somebody is like, I want to get pregnant. I'm going to be going through IVF. I need to use the pill to time this exactly because I don't get leave for my work and I got to plan it with a holiday or like whatever. Like, there's a lot of variables that exist. Or maybe somebody does have significant endometriosis. The pill doesn't always work for that. It doesn't always help people, but some people it does. And some people, that's all they can afford. That's all they can get access to. Then there's the neurodivergent community, specifically ADHD and autism, and the ebbs and flow of the hormones can affect their brain very differently. So I'm going to say, like, I almost made a generalization of like the neurotypical brain, but yeah, neurodivergent brains also benefit from progesterone. In that, progesterone can make you feel calm. It can help you sleep at night. It's very relaxing. However, there seems to be a subset of those with autism or ADHD who do not process progesterone in the same way. It doesn't interact with the receptors in the same way. And so let me back up. What's PMDD? PMDD is if you take your I feel like I want to kill my boyfriend vibe for PMS, but it actually becomes so intrusive of a thought that you are afraid you might do it. That's looking like PMDD. It can be extreme physical and mental emotional symptoms that can result in someone trying to take their own life. So it's not something that we take lightly or that we're like, you know what, let's just try a little bit of like diet and lifestyle this month and see what happens. We don't do that unless that individual also has mental health support and that they understand all their options, and that is what they are choosing. Now, why I say this is because there are clinicians who are completely anti-birth control, and they will try to do that with people. And that, I'm like, sometimes these individuals benefit from being put on the pill while they work on the nutrition and lifestyle aspects, while they work on getting the accommodations in place. And I have had people with autism who come off the pill and their PMDD is non-existent. It's something that would look more like PMS and they're successfully navigating life. But when they were in the throes of it and there was so much dysregulation and so much inflammation and really life was chaos for them, it's too much to be like, okay, can you just like work it out, like eat better, exercise, do all of these things? we have to sometimes use this tool and come in. And if people are like, well, how common is that? Well, there's a correlation with autism and PMDD being roughly about 90% of autistics may experience PMDD, and almost 50% of those with ADHD may experience that. So that's just another example of like when the pill can be used as a tool. Yeah. However, it should not be the only thing that we are doing, that we are offering, and it should be an option that we're offering, not us saying, you have this, you just take the pill. See you later. Because the other thing is that the pill, as I said in myself, but as the research has shown us, it can have adverse mood symptoms that come up when you take it. So we see this primarily in younger demographics. There's something about the vulnerability of a brain that's still forming when it comes to hormonal birth control. And again, the progestins can be really problematic in that. And what's so interesting, and please nobody misconstrue this, I want to just say this so it's really clear. We have no research to specifically say that the pill causes depression. We cannot say cause. We can only say there's a correlation there. There was a recent study looking at siblings who said we have data that may actually be the first time we can use this causation language and say the pill is causing depression. From that, before we can say it, we have to have replication. We have to have more studies that replicate that agree with that, to know that. But let me just say, like, all that aside, whoever's listening to this, if they've ever experienced adverse mood with starting the pill, you don't care what the research says. And exactly. I don't either. If you come to me and say, this is true for me, I'm going to believe you.
Yeah. So beautiful. So you mentioned that you were on the pill. Was that because of your endometriosis? Because a lot of times I think that's the treatment recommended for a lot of women. So what endometriosis is it true that we have no idea why it happens? And how is there a way to manage it? Not to use the word heal, but let's just say manage.
Yeah, I like that you say the word manage. I think that sometimes it can feel so defeating to someone when we start to talk about, like, you can heal this and you can cure this and these kinds of things. And then someone's like, well, what's wrong with me? And it's like, it's nothing. You're just a complex biological system operating in a very complex world. Like, there's a lot of variables. So what is endometriosis? Endometriosis is tissue that is similar to your uterine lining in that it responds to hormones, and it can bleed in the same way that your uterus does, but it is distinct enough that it is not exactly what we find in the endometrium. So these lesions can exist anywhere in the body. Endometriosis is a condition where these lesions are outside of the uterus. Adenomyosis or adenomyosis, this is where it's in the wall of the uterus. So with endometriosis, this can end up on the bladder, the bowels, the ovaries, the lungs, the brain, the shoulder, and it's much more rare for it to be outside the pelvis, but it can happen. So this is a systemic condition. I want people to understand this. Medicine is still reducing it to just a reproductive issue and just the baby making container problems. It's not. It is fully systemic. So it is systemic in that it is an inflammatory condition. And inflammation doesn't go just because you hurt your finger and you get some localized inflammation there, it doesn't mean the inflammatory cytokines, so these little messengers, aren't going throughout the body. When you have systemic inflammation, that's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect your joints. It's going to affect you in so many other ways. Now, the other thing to know about endometriosis, you know what? Okay. We should talk about HRT and endometriosis because I know perimenopause, menopause has questions about that, but let's back up to birth control pills. So I was actually given the pill because I had heavy, painful periods. They were so painful. I would throw up. I couldn't go to school. It was super, super bad. I would bleed through everything. Thank God this was the 90s and wearing a sweatshirt around your waist was the trend. Cause I had to live like that because And so many of my clothes were ruined. I feel like I am a master of getting blood out of things because of this. I was then, after, several years of that, 3 years of that, I was put on the pill, told that would fix everything. My skin would look better too. And then sent on my way. And then when I came off the pill and lost my period, and then it came back and it was hell again, that's when I finally was like, I'm gonna hack this. I'm gonna do this myself. I feel very like, I don't know if you're a Marvel fan, but there's like when Thanos is like, fine, I'll do it myself. I'm like, that's just, I feel like that is like something moment. Every woman has channeled. Like every woman who has been in the gynecologist office getting like dismissed has like absolutely channeled that. Like, fine, I'll do it myself. And so this is where like I didn't get the diagnosis because I was able to get my periods down from being like 8 days down to being like 3 to 5 days, down, no pain. Pain was like, I would describe my period as sneaking up on me if I wasn't tracking it. And so that came a lot through diet. So if people are like, how do you make your period less painful? Get your prostaglandins in check. Prostaglandins are hormone-like compounds that are made from your omegas. Take the standard American diet, rich in omega-6, and you're going to have cramps. You're probably going to poop yourself too, because they don't care who they make contract. They're like, uterus, bowels, let's do it together. Spoiler, that's why we get period diarrhea, or period poops as people call it. But you eat a diet higher in omega-3s and then potentially supplement with like 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of omega fatty acids. And I would just say to people, it's a lot more if you're doing algae, but if you're doing animal, it's a lot easier. So with that, though, that's going to make it so that the prostaglandins that you make, they're less potent. Add in more magnesium-rich foods into your diet, which tend to also like be accompanied by things like B6, which is going to help with estrogen metabolism, progesterone production. By the way, if you're like, what are all these things? I have a whole chart in the book of like magnesium. What do you eat? B6. What do you eat? I like take you through like all of the nutrients that can help and the ways that can help, and then tell you where to find those foods. So you can start incorporating those things. Now, if you've got severe endometriosis, the pill might be helpful in the sense that it can just shut down your ovaries. That's how it works. Shuts down your ovaries from working. You no longer get that estrogen stimulation. You no longer get that estrogen withdrawal. There's no bleeding. So when these tissues are bleeding outside the uterus, blood's not supposed to be there. Immune system has to come in. Here comes the pain, here comes the inflammation, here come the adhesions. So these can be like tissue strictures that makes everything stick together. And that's not fun. That's as fun as it sounds. It's not fun at all. And so the pill may be something that you use because you're like, I need to do this. I need to get to excision surgery, or I have to save up for excision surgery. So that's when there's actually a surgical procedure to remove these lesions. I think it's so important to understand. So the endometriosis community is like a pretty mad community, mad in that they're angry in some like subsets. And I think I want to bring this up. So if you're feeling like triggered by what I said, just hold on. And I think that it's very justified in that they've been dismissed, they've been ignored, they have fought. I mean, every time they're going in the doctor's office, it's a battle to get the care that they need, and they don't feel good. And so sometimes in those communities, they're like, excision surgery is the only way and the only thing that you can do. And then like, I'm not going to butt in there, but like, I hate, like, if you're listening, I'm gonna butt in here. I hate to break it to you, but those lesions are always forming. And even as they excise them and they take them out, talk to the best of the endosurgeons, and they will tell you they can't see everything, they can't remove everything, and it's just a matter of time until they do it again. Unless you are implementing things that can help endo. So I've talked about a few things that are like, on drbrighten.com, I actually have a ton of endo resources like endo belly for the bloating. What can you do? Getting out of an endo flare, and the endo gut connection. And this is really, really important because what your doctor may miss in your reproductive tract, maybe you don't have pain, they might send you to gastro, and gastro says you have IBS, which IBS is one of those diagnoses that I'm like, try harder. Something's going on. Don't just stop just because it's IBS, doc. Like, you could call it IBS right now, but let's go deeper, because it could be SIBO, it could be something else, but endometriosis is very well what it could be, because the bloating of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, the bloating of IBS, the bloating of endo, they all look the same, and you only know if you work it up. And this is where the research has gotten really interesting. Do we know the cause of endo? No. Do we know endocrine disruptors contribute? Of course. God, what don't they do? But we also know there is a big connection to the gut, and it may very well be. There's new research that's come out. It's really exciting. We can't call it yet, but it may very well be, just as we've always suspected it. Well, for the last 10 years, I've suspected it's an autoimmune disease, that it is triggered by an infection in the gut, dysbiosis in the gut, that there's something going on in the gut that actually triggers this condition. So do we know yet? No. But knowing enough about the gut, that is something that I'm like, you can go to, I could talk forever, right? But you can go to drbrighten.com. The resources are there to help you, and you can get started on things while you look for that perfect provider, while you try to advocate for yourself, while you try to figure out what are the next steps for you. There are a lot of things that you can do, and you need to absolutely honor what's true for you and what's your journey. Because I can sit here and I can tell you what I did and what I do with patients. That doesn't mean it's going to absolutely work perfect for you. And that doesn't mean that you're broken or you're someone who can't be helped. It just means you might need to try something else.
So beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing. I had Dr. Gandry on, and he basically had the same theory, that he noticed that the moment he heals women's guts, they feel immediately better with the endometriosis. So I love that it's just keep being repeated. Please come back to my show, because I think I asked you 5% of questions I really wanted to ask. Where can people find you if they want to, they feel super intrigued? I'm like, oh my God, she knows her shit. Where do I want to learn more. So let's talk about the book and website and Instagram.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I feel like you asked such great questions, and they were such big questions. I was like, oh my God, I'm talking so much right now. And yet, you asked me a 3-parter, and I'm like, oh. So you can find my main hub, drbrighten.com, drbrighten.com. You can find me all over social media at Jolene Brighten, and it's Jolene, just like the Dolly song, just like the new Beyonce song. And then, of course, you can find Is This Normal everywhere it's sold. Beyond the Pill, we talked about all my books. You could find them. Most people are going to go to Amazon. I know this. They're definitely there on Amazon as well. So it's been so lovely chatting with you. I wish we could have done this in person, but our schedules are just not crossing for LA. I'm like, I might have come to Bali. I don't know what that would look like, but that sounds fun.
I would love that, actually. I think you would really like it. For me, it's just immediately my body feels so much healthier, and I put a lot of effort to be healthy in LA. So it just goes to show that so many things that I'm not even aware of, right? And, I use all the organic, clothing and this and that, and still, yet there's something in the air in the United States. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. It was so lovely to meet you. Thank you for joining.